Hi, everyone. Today on the podcast, I'm talking with Dr. Don Parker, who is a transformational keynote speaker and professional development provider. He specializes in SEL, supporting teachers to build trusting relationships with students, restorative practices, trauma-informed practices, and improving the culture and climate of schools to enhance students' and teachers' feeling of belonging. Dr. Parker is a former principal and served at Posen School in Posen, Illinois, where he improved the school climate, staff collaboration, parent engagement, and student achievement. Before that, he was the principal of Lincoln Avenue School, a K-8 school in Dolton, Illinois, where he improved the culture, implemented a resilience program, managed the implementation of restorative justice, and increased attendance and student achievement. Dr. Parker has a strong belief in creating a school climate in which the entire staff strives for excellence to meet the academic and social emotional needs of each student. He's presented throughout the U.S. at distinguished educational conferences, including ASCD, Every Student Succeeds Act Conference, the National Principals Conference, Illinois Principals Conference, Oklahoma Secondary and Elementary Conference, the Raising a Student Achievement Conference, Transforming School Culture Conference, and the Innovative School Summit, just to name a few. Dr. Parker is the author of the book Building Bridges, Engaging Students at Risk Through the Power of Relationships, and his newest, Be the Driving Force, Leading Your School on the Road to Equity, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Let's get to the episode. I'm educational justice coach Lindsay Lyons, and here on the Time for Teachership podcast, we learn how to inspire educational innovation for racial and gender justice, design curricula grounded in student voice, and build capacity for shared leadership. I'm a former teacher leader turned instructional coach. I'm striving to live a life full of learning, running, baking, traveling, and parenting because we can be rockstar educators and be full human beings. If you're a principal, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, instructional coach, or teacher who enjoys nerding out about co-created curriculum with students, I made this show for you. Here we go. Dr. Don Parker, welcome to the Time for Teachership podcast.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay. Good morning.
Good morning. I am so excited for our conversation. I was just saying before we hit record, your book is excellent. I loved it. So I think there's so many things that you might want to share, your new book being one, but I think a lot of times, like I like to ask the question right off the bat, like what is important for listeners to know either about you or like something that you've been doing or thinking about lately that's going to ground our conversation today.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you. So I am very passionate about working with students and working with teachers to help teachers become more trauma informed, to help students with their social and emotional learning, to teach students pro-social behaviors. And so teachers can, touch the heart before they touch the brain. And so that's what my expertise is in. I've had experiences being a high school health teacher. And if you know anything about the health curriculum, it really teaches students how to make healthy choices, teaching them problem-solving skills, critical thinking skills, all those things that students need in order to be successful, not only in school, but also in life. And so that position transitioned me into being a dean of students, where I was teaching students pro-social behaviors, doing a lot of authoritative counseling, building relationships with students. And that's what led me to this work now, is helping other teachers be successful with those students who may have challenging behaviors.
Oh, I love that. And actually, I don't mean to go into your book so soon, but I want to because it was so good. One of the things that I did not know, but makes so much sense having just been in schools, was that one of the things that you decided to do was to use Mondays as like an extra relationship building time, because often the researchers found that the trauma could spike in the weekends. And I was like, yes, this makes so much sense. So let's make space for it.
Absolutely. So when I was the principal of my school, I noticed that we had students who had a lot of trauma, and teachers were having a hard time. They said, we want to build relationships, but we don't have time to build relationships. And we want to attend the students' social and emotional learning, but we don't have the time. So in order to make anything successful, you have to automate it and you have to systematize it. And so I just built a system where I worked with the president of our teachers union. And I said, hey, look, this is what my teachers are asking for. I want to do this at my school. Instead of having homeroom where it's only 15 minutes in the beginning of the day where teachers come in, take attendance, and basically transition the students to the next class, I want to build in an hour on Monday mornings so my teachers can have time to do social and emotional learning activities and build relationships with students. So during that time, we did morning meetings, classroom circles, and it was a time where teachers didn't have to feel rushed. They could really talk to their students, find out what was going on in their lives, find out what kind of social academic support that they needed. And it really just set the tone for the rest of the week. Because there's a phrase that says, you're going to pay now or pay later. And so if we don't tend to our students' social emotional learning needs, we're worried about disruptions throughout the school day, It's like if we can settle them down at the beginning of the morning, you know, give them what they need in order to be successful, give them the coping strategies that they need, it just helps the school day go a lot smoother.
Mm. Yes, I love it. And I love that you use circles as the specific practice within that time. Just so much of what you said, like teachers not feeling rushed. Like, so to be able to say, like, we have the system or the structure built in, a lot of times I hear from teachers that it's like, well, I don't have that system or structure. So now I have to sacrifice the content that I'm teaching or whatever to squeeze it in. And then I feel
Yeah.
rushed and it's not really authentic. And like, I just love that this was a school-wide initiative to be like, we're doing it. We're giving you the time. Here it is. It's
Right, you're right,
beautiful.
because everything has to be research-based, evidence-based, and what the research says is that Monday mornings are the most traumatic time for not only students, but also teachers. Like, teachers sometimes have a lot of anxiety coming to school on a Monday morning. This just gives everyone the opportunity to just breathe, and, just get in the right mind frame in order to have a good school day.
Mm, I love that. And
Thank
so,
you.
yeah, like backing up a little bit, because I think we just dove right in there with like a concrete thing that people could do as a takeaway for this episode. But I also want to know at kind of a larger scale, I love how Dr. Bettina Love talks about freedom dreaming as dreams grounded in the critique of injustice. And so
Mhm.
I love thinking about schools and educational change and leadership in this way. I'm wondering, and you've touched on it a bit, I think, but what is that big dream that you hold for education globally?
Wow, it goes to the title of my book. So the title of the book is Be the Driving Force, Leading Your School on the Road to Equity. I would just like equitable schools, equitable classrooms, and just equitable opportunities for students so that students can get what they need in order to be successful. All right. So we're talking about funding, we're talking about curriculum, we're talking about experiences. All right. Every student deserves a high quality education. And I know it sounds pie in the sky, but that's really what would be my big dream for education is that we can provide each student with a quality education, support their social emotional learning needs, and really truly help them reach their highest potential.
Such a simple but powerful and massively effective dream. I love it.
Mhm.
So when we think about the path that takes, I love all of the big metaphor of cars that you use in your latest book. And so I think about, what that path looks like on the road to that dream for leaders, for schools, for districts, right? As they're kind of making all of those changes. And I mean, we could even just like read through your table of contents because it really lays it out right there for each of
Sure.
the sections. But what are the things that you think are most important or come first to mind when we think about kind of those stepping stones or those pieces to
Okay.
put in that path?
Sure. Okay. So we're familiar with the phrase that it starts at the top. And so, Be the Driving Force, Leading Your School on the Road to Equity is really a how to book for school leaders on how to promote equity and enhance equity in their schools. And so, what I think is the most important is the chapter that I write when I talk about vision. And so, as you know, throughout the book, it's a metaphor that has to do with the car or have to do with driving. And I tie that to a school leadership principle. And so, when we talk about vision, when we talk about driving, okay, I used to teach driver's ed. I was a driver's ed and PE teacher. And when we taught students how to drive, we would teach them to look further than just, one or two cars ahead. We teach them to look as far down the road as you can. All right. You have to have vision in order to see far down the road. And what we teach them is that it helps you to avoid hazards and it keeps you focused on where you're going. And so when it comes down to school leaders have to have a robust vision, and they have to not only have a vision, but they have to have their school staff, students, and community buy into the vision that they have for the school. All right, now we know as teachers and even like student support personnel, how there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we're doing a lot of work. But leaders, yes, you have to do the work, but at the same time, we're paying you to think. We're paying you to be a visionary. Like my boss used to tell me, Don, you're the CEO of this school. So we have to think about innovation. We have to think about the future. We have to establish the vision. And then we have to influence all stakeholders in order to work towards that common vision that we have. And so just like a driver has to have vision far down the road, a school leader has to have a vision that's far down the road of what you're trying to accomplish and what you want your school to be, and then influence everybody to work towards that end.
I love that. And I particularly love, I think it's page 83, that there were examples. You have like a whole table of like the equity-based vision statements. And I love this because I cannot tell you how upset I get when I look at someone's website and they have like this really like ineffective equity statement. And I'm like, yeah, no, you're not doing that work. Like, and I just know, right? And
Sure.
so it is so cool, I think, for leaders to actually go in, open the book to that table and just be like, does our vision statement that we say is like rah, rah equity actually effective? Does it dig in, or is it just super surface level? And I just loved some of those examples that you shared because I was like, this is it.
Thank you. I love it. You're right, because when you have a vision statement that encompasses equity, it has to talk about what outcomes, all right, are going to be accomplished as a result of that vision statement. So you may have a vision statement that may mention equity in it. However, the outcomes, it was really determines equity. What results are we getting? Are we really accomplishing what it is that we're setting out to do and not just saying it?
Absolutely. And I mean, some of them too, really like one of them is like, do you mind if I like read
Now go for it.
word for
Please do.
word?
Please do.
So one of them is ineffective would be we strive to treat everyone equally, right? And so it's just like,
Mhm.
oh man, like we're gonna not even say we're going to do something. We're going to say we're striving to do something. Right?
Sure,
We're gonna
sure.
try. And then, but like also the thing that you're saying is like when it's effective, it's not just like treat everyone equally or even treat everyone equitably, but we're recognizing and addressing systemic inequities. So we're actually identifying the thing. And we're recognizing that they've created disparities in educational opportunities and outcomes for historically marginalized groups. So you're saying like, we're not just saying at surface level equity is good. We're saying we recognize and we're going to specifically identify in our community this stuff is going on behind the scenes, and we're committed to consistently digging it up, identifying it, and making that part of our equitable process, which I
Right.
just love.
Exactly. Because the thing is, we can say a vision statement, but in order to really accomplish the vision, you have to do the work. So I've attached the work to what the vision is and telling people what you have to do in order to accomplish this. These are things you have to do. You have to really look at historically marginalized groups. How can we better serve these students? All right. Inequitable policies. How can we change these policies so that they're not harming, certain groups? And then you have to do that work in order to accomplish whatever the vision is. So I attach that to the vision statement so people know exactly what needs to be done in order to promote and advance equity.
I love it because you can be looking at a policy and say, well, does this do the thing that we say we're doing, right? And that was one of my favorite chapters, was chapter 7, where you talk about revising school policies and procedures. There's
Mhm.
so much in there that I loved. I mean, just kind of high level, you talk a lot about student voices being central to the process of uncovering and digging into some of those policies and co-creating or revising the policies. You talk about restorative practices. You talk about AP enrollments. You talk about like what are the structures and mindsets and things that we have to work through to do that better and give everyone access. Like it was just amazing. And so I don't know if there are pieces that you want to talk more about here to kind of illuminate for listeners, but I just loved all of those pieces.
Well, here's the thing, Lindsay. When we talk about equity, people are used to talking about the achievement gap and the opportunity gap. But some people don't even want to discuss the acknowledgement gap, where they don't want to even acknowledge that there are inequitable practices or inequitable policies or things taking place that actually harm students. And so we have to look at the barriers, that are in place that need to be removed and dismantled so that students really can get that quality instruction and have opportunities. And at first, we have to acknowledge and say, you know what? Are we even recognizing, how we are either promoting our students to be successful or how we are hindering their success? And once they acknowledge it, then you can start saying, okay, ask those deep questions of what do we need to do in order to make a more equitable school environment for all students. And not just historically marginalized students, not just low income students, not just Black and Brown students, but all students. It's for everyone. We want to see every single student be successful.
Yeah, I love that you included research in there too, right? That like white kids are massively benefiting from having like teachers who are a different race than them, of learning about diverse stories and histories and authors. Like it is beneficial to everyone. Like the end, right?
It's
Like
beneficial to, you're exactly right, 100%. And so I was talking to an equity expert and they explained it like this. All right. There was some law where we had to make sidewalks accessible for handicapped people who had to use disabled people. I should not say handicapped, for disabled people who needed to be pushed around in wheelchairs or roll themselves in wheelchairs. And so you know how they had the curb, but now they have this ramp. And so they said, now this was built for a person in a wheelchair. However, just think about a mom pushing a stroller and they could just easily push that stroller up. So it not only benefits the people who are disabled, but it benefits people on a larger scale. And so that's what equity work does. The same, um, the same, I guess, what do you call it? The same accommodations or modifications and variety of teaching skills that we're using to help students from a different group will also help the majority of students. So we're doing it for everyone.
that is such a good example that you shared. And I also reminds me, I'm pretty sure, I don't know if this is based on the research, but I heard this from someone that texting came about because they were trying to create a support for people who were hearing impaired and couldn't use the phone like auditorily. And it was
Mhm.
like, now look at texting. Like people, there are like young people who are like, I refuse to call someone on the phone. I only text.
That's a great analogy. You're exactly right. That's another perfect example, Lindsay. Look at you.
So there are so many different things in this book where you really break it down for people. And I love that, like, you know, there are surveys in there so people can just grab the book, take the survey, assess where they are, and then
Mhm.
figure out the next step for them. Is there anything else as people kind of think about going through the pieces of this book, or how to engage with the book, that you would recommend for people kind of on a process level of working through some of this stuff?
100%. Yes. So absolutely. When you read the book, look at the research that's included in the book. This book is research rich. However, I understand how people need a more practical breakdown of the research and how can they actually put this research in action for themselves. And so what I do is I talk about what this looks like in the real world, and I'll talk about my experience and doing these evidence-based practices in order to promote equity in my school. And then the book gives a survey where it asks you, okay, well, how effective is your school at, at X, Y, or Z in promoting equity? But then beyond that, there's another section of each chapter that talks about action items, where it gives them clear activities, clear actions that they can take to advance equity or to accomplish whatever topic there was in the chapter, so that they can promote equity and equitable practices in their schools.
Hi, everyone. It's Lindsay, just popping in here to tell you about today's episode freebie. Dr. Parker and I talk about all the resources and reproducibles in his book. He is sharing one of them with you for free on leading equitable practices. You can grab it at the blog post for today's episode at lindsaybethlyons.com/blog/153. Back to the episode, whatever you want to call it, that you can actually use in action right now today. And I love
100%.
it because it spans the whole range of like the person who is research minded. I'm thinking of a leader who's like, you know, kind of leading this team
Mhm.
of individuals who have different affinities for like, just give me the action right now versus I need to be convinced that this is even worth doing, right? And I think
100%.
individual leaders the same, right? Some leaders are going to want the convincing of give me all the research and tell me why I need to read this chapter, and then other people are like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with the research, or I don't need to be convinced. Like, give me the list where you're like writing in bullet points, give me the reproducible survey, and I'm going for it.
And you know what? Why that's important, Lizzie, is because when it comes down to change, whether it's organizational change, whether it's systems change, whether it's change in schools, okay. But I've learned when we talk about managing change in schools, they say the first step, the very first step in promoting change is creating a sense of urgency. And so we have to state the problem and we have to show what the problem is and why that problem exists. And we have to show if this problem continues, how detrimental it can be to the school or the organization. So if we continue to, go to school every day and, do school the way we've done in the past, right, and just sweep the problem under the rug, the problem is just going to grow. And when it comes down to school equity, what the problem is students are going to have less sense of feeling of belonging. All right, they're not going to get a quality of instruction. And if you just imagine, if you forecast out 5, 10, 20 years, if students don't like school, if teachers aren't enjoying teaching the curriculum and attending to students' social emotional learning needs, then imagine what school will look like 10 or 20 years down the line. Okay, we have to have a sense of urgency in order to not convince, influence, but have teachers to buy in and say this is the right thing that we need to do for our students, staff, and community.
Absolutely. And I often think about like the structures, like you were talking about systematizing things. And I think if you have those structures and it's systematic, like when we, regularly review our policy, we include student and family voices, right? Or like whatever the pieces are, that it's like,
Mhm.
if this is just the way we do things, then like those systems and structures aren't just for this year's policy that we're reviewing or whatever. It's for every succeeding policy we review. And so you're really kind of laying a foundation for doing this work more smoothly, more quickly, more efficiently later, and more
100%.
equitably.
You're right. You're exactly right. Because, like you said, it's ongoing and becomes part of our process. And it's just, the thing that we do, where it isn't hard anymore because it's comes so naturally to us now.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that I think is, there's two kind of questions. I wonder if they kind of will have the same answer. I'm not sure, but I'll pose them both to you and you can choose which one or both if you want to
Okay.
answer them. One thing I'm wondering, especially with equity work, is like, is there a mindset shift that you have seen kind of unlock action or um the new way of thinking really like moves the path forward more quickly with that sense of urgency or something. So one question is about the mindset shift. Is there a mindset shift that you've seen be effective for leaders in this work? Or two, is there like a big challenge that you've seen districts face, you faced as a leader, a team has faced, and you would recommend like a way to like get through or move through that challenge?
hmm So yes, it's absolutely a mindset. So when we talk about the new year and people setting goals that they want to accomplish, whether it's fitness goals, professional goals, personal goals, all right, whatever it is, you have to make the decision that this is exactly what I'm going to accomplish this year. And it has to be a mindset because Oprah has a quote that says, you should create the highest vision for yourself because what you believe is what you become. Okay. So it all starts with how you think, what you think in your head, and what you believe in your heart. All right. So a perfect example would be my wife. She loves running marathons. Okay. I hate long distance running. I love weight training. Right. And so my wife one year asked me if I would run a marathon with her. But for all my life, I never liked doing long distance running. Even when I was a high school PE student, we had to do the mile run. I would always come in last place because I would get tired. I'm just not good at long distance running. However, I'm really good. And I learned this when I was a PE major, when I was studying kinesiology, is that some people genetically have what you call um, quick fire muscles. All right. And some people have what they call like long distance muscles, where their body is just built where they have slow twitch muscles. All right. So we have fast twitch muscles and slow twitch muscles. And I just imagine that I have fast twitch muscles because when it comes to burst speed or just like, high power reps, I'm good at that. So I told my wife, you know what? If I had a goal to increase my bench press by 50 pounds, like I believe I would do that. I would be enthusiastic about it. I'll be energized to do it because I believe I could do it. When it comes to long distance running, I don't believe that I could do it because, and then when it's time for us to train, I would have a bad attitude, I wouldn't be enthusiastic about it, and I would just pull you down. All right. And so the bottom line is, all right, our beliefs dictate our actions. All right. So when it comes to mindset, if we don't believe that we can accomplish something, if we don't believe it's important, we're not going to work hard towards it. But if we believe that we can accomplish it and we adopt the mindset that this is something that we can do, then we're going to do it. And so think about it. If I said I was going to do equity work, but I really didn't believe in equity, and I really didn't believe that I had what it take in order to influence my staff and my community that this is what needs to be done, then when I step into my school every day, I'm just going through the motions. And here's the harm in that, Lindsay. If I'm a school leader and I step into the building and I'm just going through the motions, then imagine what will my staff, community, and students do? They would step into the school just going through the motions. However, if I really believe in this, then my actions are going to be dictated by my beliefs. And so I'm going to work hard towards equity. I'm going to influence my staff that this is what's going to need to be done. They will see my actions and then they could follow. And so belief and mindset is so important because your actions are dictated by your beliefs, what you think in your mind and what you believe in your heart.
I love that response. And I was smiling because you're literally describing the dynamic between you and your wife. The same conversation happened like a year ago. I'm a marathon runner. My partner is a kinesiologist and he is way into weight training and not long distance running. And literally, I don't know what it was about the last year, but he like did some long distance running and he was like, you know what? I'm going to do it. Did it, loved it. Now he wants to do a half Ironman. And I'm like, this is your future,
There
Dr.
it is.
Parker.
There it is. His mindset switch, right? And
Yeah.
that's what has to happen, that mindset switch, because people, they're either, whether they're aware of it or unaware, what really happens, what the bottom line comes to is that your mindset dictates your action.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering, do you think that is the biggest challenge that people have with this work is just like right off the bat, just not believing in it, believing that they could be effective in doing the work. And so they just don't even kind of get to the second step of the process?
But think about it, yeah, because if you looked at a task and it was so overwhelming, right? Then you're going to procrastinate. You're going to come up with every excuse as why not to do it. Okay. But winners, when they look at challenges, they look at it as opportunities for growth. And they look at it as these are things that I can do in order to improve. And so they take that challenge on because they know the importance of doing the work and they know what the outcome would be. And so a winner isn't um, discouraged by the problem, they're motivated by the result. And so that's what school leaders, teachers, community members, they have to be motivated by the end result as opposed to being defeated by the challenge.
I love that so much. And I think about your book and the way that it's laid out and the case studies that you kind of share of just like, here's what my experience was and here's the result that we got. I just
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I think that leadership can be so isolating, right? If you're just in your own space and you don't, especially if you're in a like a smaller district, there's not as many people doing the same work as you or something. You might not be in a PLC with like other leaders or principals or whatever. It can be really hard to know what is possible
Mm-hmm.
unless you pick up a book and see this person did this. This was the context. This is the action steps they took. This is the result. And then that can, even if you've never met the person, right? Just reading about someone or listen to a podcast about something like can give you then the picture of what is possible and then
Mm-hmm.
allow you to be motivated, I think, through that, which is cool.
100%, 100%. And what you're describing, Lindsay, is called vicarious learning. And so where we may feel like it's not possible for ourselves, but then once we see somebody else have done it, now we can say, hey, you know what? He did this, or this person accomplished this. I can accomplish this too. It's like the person who first run a marathon. You're a marathon runner. Who would think that it's possible that you can run 26.2 miles? And then they found that I forgot the person's name who broke the what was it, the 6 minute mile and then the 4 minute mile.
Yep.
They're like, wow, this is possible to do. And so when we can sometimes do by experience vicarious learning, we can say, okay, this is a huge challenge. We know that it will be a huge undertaking, yet we can be inspired because we've seen that this has been done. And so it's a process. And so since we're talking about the workout analogy and getting in shape, we know that you can't just go to the gym once and get in shape. All right, we understand that it's a process. And so what we know about getting in shape, that it's comes down to consistency and it's setting that vision of what our goals are. And so it's the same thing with the school. What school leaders need to do is sit down with their staff and community and write out what are 3 or 4 important goals. And now we have to think about what is the work that has to be done in order to achieve this goal. And now we're going to step into our schools, into our school districts, and we're going to just consistently work on achieving this goal. And next thing you know, like I said, it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight. But a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we can be proud that we accomplished the goal.
Excellent. I think we've talked about so many different things that I'm wondering as kind of like a final call to action or action step, what is the starting point for someone listening to this episode and then saying like, okay, I'm going to start. I want to do one thing, start building that momentum, like that first trip in the gym that usually happens around New Year's. And like that went well. I'm doing another one. What does that first action step look like, or could it look like for a listener?
Okay. So it can look like going to talk to a student and let's say, okay, that's what empathy is putting myself in someone else's shoes and learning what their experience is. And just asking students who may be from a historically marginalized group, who may be LGBTQ plus, right, who may be low income, or just a struggling learner, and just asking them, what are some of the things that we can do to better support you academically? What are some of the things that we can do to better support you socially and emotionally? Okay. And asking them, what has your experience been in this school? And how can we make it better? Okay. And then just taking notes, writing down some of the things the student says, and then taking it back to a committee. You can establish an equity committee and say, this is what we're learning from my students' experience. Okay. And so what can we do in order to create a more um, environment that supports student success? And just start there. And then have your goals drafted because each school is going to be different. Okay. Each school district has its own unique set of challenges that schools leaders can do in order to overcome. So that's one place that I would start. It's simple, it's practical, and then everyone can do it. Anyone can do
Yeah. As soon as you're done with the episode, walk down the hallway, find a student.
it. Right. Or you can find groups of students and
Great.
survey them through the same questions, and then take that data and say, okay, what are the themes that we're seeing here? Okay, what are the things that continue to come up? And so these are obvious issues that we know that we need to address. And
I
then they
love
can
it.
pick up a copy of Be the Driving Force, and they can find that issue in my book, whether it's policies, whether it's something that has to do with school vision and mission statement, whether it's something that has to do with curriculum, whatever it is. And they can look for that in the book and they can say, okay, here's some solid action items that we can take in order to achieve our goal.
I love that reminder because people aren't just like, getting collecting the information, learning about the challenges and the experiences of students and not knowing where to go next. There are several ideas of where to go next in your book. So excellent point. And I think to wrap up, and you're kind of leading us down that way, I think this is a perfect opportunity for a close. Two questions I usually ask people.
Mhm.
So the first one is something that you've been learning about. So we talk a lot on the show about like how we're helping people learn on this in this conversation for people who are listening. What is something that you have been learning about? And it could literally be anything, does not have to relate to education.
Okay. Well, I am going to relate to education because it's just so poignant for the time that we're in right now. All right. So I started my career in 1997 as a PE and health teacher. And I love that job. I love the school where I got hired in because you could walk from one end of the hall to the next end of the hall and you can hear about 6 or 7 different languages. The school was so diverse and I love that. So I was a PE teacher for like 5 years before I became a dean of students. And when I became a dean of students, I worked in an all Black school. And then when I became an assistant principal, again, I moved to a school where it's an all Black school. And my first principal job was in an all Black school. But my second principal job was in a school that was 70% Hispanic and 30% Black, Title I, low income school. And so I had to learn more about the Hispanic culture and how I can accommodate them and build equity for them so they have a sense of belonging. And even now, when we talk about, immigration in the United States and how many diverse students that we're getting, okay, so I'm learning more and more about different cultures, about how they learn, about how they do things. And so what it's teaching me is teaching me to be more informed about how to better accommodate these students in these student groups so that I can, support their education in a way that they see it as support, in a way that helps them, that accelerates their learning.
I love that answer. Thank you for sharing that. And I think the
Mhm.
last question is just where can people get in touch with you? I think people are going to want to read your book, learn from you, continue the journey with you. So is there social media, website, anything like that where they can go?
100%. So my website is drdonparker.com. That's my website. And people can email me at drdonparker@drdonparker.com. And they can follow me on Twitter at drdonparker1. And so I keep it simple. So as long as you know me, you can find me. As long as you know my name, you can find me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Parker. This was a great conversation. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Lindsay. I appreciate it. I love your energy. I love your enthusiasm. And I love how you want to just share great tips and things that your listeners can do to become better educators, to create a better experience for teachers and students.
Thank you. If you like this episode, I bet you'll be just as jazzed as I am about my coaching program for increasing student-led discussions in your school. Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan talk about a pedagogy of student voice in their book, Street Data. They say students should be talking for 75% of class time. Do students in your school talk for 75% of each class period? I would love for you to walk into any classroom in your community and see this in action. If you're smiling to yourself as you listen right now, grab 20 minutes on my calendar to brainstorm how I can help you make this big dream a reality. I'll help you build a comprehensive plan from full-day trainings and discussion protocols like Circle and Socratic Seminar to follow-up classroom visits where I can plan, witness, and debrief discussion-based lessons with your teachers. Sign up for a nerdy, no-strings-attached brainstorm call at lindsayBethlyons.com/contact. Until next time, leaders, think big, act brave, and be your best self.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at teachbetter.com/podcasts, and we'll see you at the next episode.